Here we have a Linux distribution, but not just any Linux distro. It's running inside a container, and that container is being presented inside a web browser. And this is just one of the things that I'll be showing you how to do in today's video as we explore Kasm. Hello again everyone, and welcome back to Learn Linux TV. In today's video, what I'm going to do is give you an entire getting started guide for Kasm, a container-based solution that enables you to launch applications and even entire Linux distros inside your web browser. In this complete guide, I'm going to give you all the information that you'll need to be fully productive with Kasm, and by the end of the video, you'll know exactly how to use it. And for those of you that haven't heard of Kasm before, it's a container-based solution that you can use to launch applications or even entire Linux distributions right in your browser. You can run applications such as Thunderbird and LibreOffice, Linux distributions such as Ubuntu, and a bunch more. And best yet, you can self-host Kasm and run it from within your own infrastructure. So in this video, I've teamed up with Kasm to present a complete tutorial that'll go over everything that you'll need to know to be productive with Kasm, and it'll start from the installation and go all the way up to managing workspaces with this solution. However, before we get started, I need to give you guys a quick disclaimer. This video is being sponsored by Kasm, but this is not a review, and I will not be giving you my opinion on Kasm as a product in this video. This video is for those of you that have already decided to use Kasm and want some information on how to use it. So we'll be going over things like installing it and managing workspaces and things like that, but I'll leave my opinion out of this because I've already gave you my opinion on Kasm in a completely separate video where I gave it a full review. If you haven't seen my review video for Kasm yet, then I'll leave a card for that video right about here. So if you want to know my thoughts on Kasm as a product, then definitely check out that video. But in this video, we're going to focus on the hands-on examples that are required to get you started with Kasm. Also, in the description down below, I'm going to leave some time codes there. That way, you don't have to watch a section that goes over something you already know. You can skip ahead to a section that represents where you are in the process of learning Kasm. And with all of that out of the way, let's get started. As I mentioned during the introduction, Kasm is a container-based solution, so let's start there. Kasm is a solution that you can install on your Linux server, and it enables you to launch containers or workspaces that each feature applications as well as entire Linux distributions, and these workspaces run from within your web browser. This means you could do things like edit photos with GIMP, write documents with LibreOffice, browse the internet with Google Chrome in a sandbox browsing session right from within your existing web browser. There's just a lot you could do with this solution, and these workspaces can be easily created and destroyed, so you could choose to keep your state within an application or remove it at any time. After Kasm is set up, you'll manage it through your web browser by logging into its web console, which is where you'll spend the most of your time managing your implementation. On the console, you'll have a dashboard you can use to view some stats and metrics regarding the workspaces that you have running, a registry section where you can browse available workspaces so you can launch a new one, or even add additional registries for even more apps. Once you've found an application in the registry that you want to launch, you could do so by clicking the Install button, and after everything is downloaded and set up in the background, your new workspace will show up on the Workspaces tab of the console, which shows everything that you have installed. And there's a multitude of use cases for a solution such as this, and it's limited only by your imagination. For example, you could spin up a web browser within Kasm in order to set up a sandbox browsing session that you can simply destroy once you're finished with. Another popular use case is launching entire Linux distributions, so that way you could test software that you might be developing on specific distributions. In fact, you can even set up entire development environments within Kasm. Now, that was a very simple explanation of what Kasm is. Now, I don't know if you're like me, but I learned by doing. I learned by getting my hands on with a solution so that way I could put it through its paces and see what it looks like and how it operates. So what I'm going to do in the next section is talk about what you'll need in order to get started, if you want to follow along with me. And then from there, we'll install Kasm, we'll set up workspaces. It's going to be a lot of fun. So I'll see you in the next section where I'll talk about what's needed in order to get started. In the next section, we're going to install Kasm, but before we do that, I want to make sure that you understand what's needed in order to get started with Kasm, and you'll know in this section exactly what you'll need in order to set up a Kasm server of your own. First, you'll need your own Linux server. While you can use Kasm by subscribing to the software as a service version that's hosted for you, we're going to be using the self-hosted version, so we'll work through the process of setting it up on our own hardware during this video. For that reason, you'll need to have your own Linux server in order to follow along with the hands-on labs that I'll be giving you guys during this tutorial. In order to satisfy that requirement, you could use a physical server to install Kasm onto, or a VM is fine as well. You could even use a VPS provider such as Akamai's Connected Cloud, DigitalOcean, and there's a number of others, but please be advised that there's an additional cost associated with VPS instances that has nothing to do with Kasm, as cloud hosting providers typically charge for virtual machines on their platform. For the purposes of this walkthrough, I'll be creating a Debian-based virtual machine on Proxmox to use for the walkthrough. Running Kasm within a Proxmox VM is perfectly acceptable, and that's the way that I'm going to be deploying it. When it comes to which distribution your Linux server should be running, the following operating systems are supported by Kasm. When it comes to Ubuntu, versions 18.04, 20.04, and 22.04 are supported. For Debian, versions 10, 11, and 12 are supported. Supported versions for CentOS includes versions 7, 8, and 9, with Oracle Linux also versions 7, 8, and 9, and Raspberry Pi OS is supported as well, and yes, that means you can run Kasm on a Raspberry Pi. Now there's also additional distributions that you could use to install Kasm on as well, and those are mentioned in the official documentation pages. For the sake of this walkthrough though, I'm going to focus on the Debian virtual machine that I'll be creating. When it comes to resource requirements, the information presented on the screen right now shows the minimum requirements in order for Kasm to work. However, please bear in mind that depending on the workspaces that you intend to run with the solution, you may need additional resources as it's entirely dependent on your environment. Doubling each of the resources that you see on the screen would give you even more flexibility, but it all comes down to the hardware that you have available. Another thing to note is that Kasm recommends a swap partition is present on the server. Obviously, swap is one of those things we hope we never need, but we definitely want to have available, and Kasm recommends that you do have swap available in case you need it. Now also, keep in mind that SSD storage is a minimum requirement. Outside of that, we're pretty much ready to go. All we need is a Linux server, and it doesn't really matter where your Linux server is or what kind of hardware it is, if it's even hardware at all. But if you have a server that meets these minimum specifications, or preferably even has better specifications than this, then we'll be clear to get started. So in the next section, what we're going to do is work through the process of installing Kasm. With the requirements out of the way, let's walk through the process of installing Kasm. On my end, what I'll do is create a virtual machine on one of my Proxmox nodes. And what I'll do is grab a Debian 12 template that I've already created. If you're curious how to go about creating a template within Proxmox, I have a dedicated video that covers that. I'll leave a card for that video right about here. But since I have this template here, what I'll do is clone it. I'll give it a very unique virtual machine ID. Create it as a full clone. And what I'll do is name it Kasm Host, just like that. So I'll clone it. And we'll wait for that to finish. Now, you don't have to use Proxmox, that's what I'm using right here, but if you have a server already, then you could go ahead and use that server for the installation of Kasm. Again, I'm creating a virtual machine within my infrastructure because I have the server available, I may as well use it. And it looks like this particular virtual machine is done being provisioned. So what I'm going to do is go to Hardware. I want to make sure that it has enough resources to run Kasm. I went over what's required to run Kasm in the previous section. But what I'll do is give this VM a little bit of horsepower here. So rather than having 2 gigabytes of RAM for this server, I'm going to give it 16. And then for the number of processors, I'll just crank this up to about 4. I think that should be more than enough for this particular solution. So I'll click OK. And that should be everything that I need to set up, at least on my end. So I have the option set for the hardware. And what I'm going to do now is start the instance. I'll give this a moment to start up. And on my end, I need Cloud Init to finish provisioning the instance after it boots up. So I'll be right back as soon as all of that is complete. All right, the process has completed and I'm rebooting the instance to make sure that everything is fully up to date. My virtual machines will automatically update the first time they boot up. Now, on your end, I highly recommend that you complete all of the available security updates for your chosen Linux distribution. I have a video on my channel that goes over everything that you should do when you first set up a server, so I recommend that you check out that video to learn more about the things that you should do every time you set up a new Linux instance. So what you could do is pause this video, go watch that video, complete all of the steps in that video for setting up your virtual machine. None of the steps in that video are specific to Kasm, but are just some things that you should do for every Linux server that you set up. Once you're done with that, then I'll meet you back here and we can resume this video. Anyway, on my end, what I'll do is grab the IP address for this instance, and right here it is. I'm going to copy that IP, and then I'll switch over to a terminal, and what I'm going to do is use SSH to connect to that virtual machine. So I'll press enter, type in my password, and there we go. I'm connected to the virtual machine that I set up to be my Kasm host. This is going to be a single server installation, and now that I have this set up, I can go ahead and install Kasm. So let's get the installation started. There's 3 sets of commands that will result in Kasm being installed on your hardware, and to set it up, you'll only need to run commands from one set of instructions. First, there's the standard installation, which is what most of you will probably choose. If you're at all in doubt when it comes to which one you should use, then go with this method. In addition to the standard installation, there's also a few offline installers available as well, one for x86 and the other for ARM-based systems. If you need an offline installer for any reason, then you would choose either one of those depending on which CPU your host server has, and the primary difference is that the offline installers will have you download the container images as well, which would normally be downloaded from the internet. For this tutorial, I'm going to cover the standard installer, but I'll also have instructions for the offline installers in the official blog post for this video in case you need those, and those commands are also available from Kasm's documentation pages as well. Now, I'm going to go through the installation process, but one thing that I'm not going to do is go through the actual code within the installer. I always recommend that you check the code in all installers that you execute on your Linux servers, and I'll leave that up to you, but I just wanted to mention it because it's very important. I've already tested everything on my end, so there's no need for me to do this, but I just wanted to mention that in case you weren't already aware of the best practice. So to get started, we'll change directory into our temp directory. And on my end, I have an automatic ls every time I change directory into any other directory, so that's why I automatically receive this directory listing. That's just a bash function that I set up, so we'll ignore that. Now what I'll do is paste in the next command that we'll need, and here it is. Again, these commands will be available on the blog post for this video. I'll also have a link for the instructions as well in the documentation pages. Note that the software version will change every now and then, so it's a good idea to get the URL from the official documentation so that way you're getting the most recent version. In this case, I'm going to be installing version 1.14 of Kasm. But what this command is going to do for us is download the compressed archive that contains the install script, so I'll press enter. And that's done. So if I list the storage again right here, you can see that I have Kasm release 1.14 downloaded here in my temp directory. Next, what I'll do is run the tar command. I want to extract that particular compressed archive, and it's located right here in my temp directory where I already am. So I'll start typing Kasm, and then autocomplete will take care of the rest. I'll press enter. And if I list the storage again, you can see that I have a Kasm release directory, so let's go inside of that directory there. And as you can see, we have the install script. And let's run it. What I'll do is prefix the command with sudo. If you are running as root, you don't have to do this, but I'm logged in as my normal user here. And what I want to do is run the install script. And the file name is install.sh. It's located inside the Kasm release directory, and this is the command that we'll use to get the installation started. So I'll press enter. And here we get some information for the end user license agreement. So what I'll do is accept that by typing Y, and I'll press enter. And now it's going to proceed with the installation. Okay, so at this point, installation of Kasm on my server is complete. If I scroll up, I have quite a bit of information here. I get all of the login credentials that are associated with Kasm here in terminal output. So what you're going to want to do is copy all of this information down and put it somewhere safe. You definitely don't want to show this to anybody. and you especially don't want to show this in clear text to everyone watching a YouTube video, but in my case, it's okay because this particular test machine will be deleted by the time I finish recording this video, but in general, you want to keep this information private. Of special importance here is the username admin@kasm.local. That's going to be the username we'll use to log in to this particular application, and we get the password here as well. So what I recommend you do is copy all of this information down, and when you're ready to check out the user interface, I'll see you in the next section. Alright, so at this point you have your very own Kasm server set up and ready for action, but how do you go about using it? Well, what I'm going to do in this section is give you a quick high-level summary of the UI. I'm going to show you the various sections within the UI, and I'll let you know what each section does for you and what you can configure within each. I'm not going to go into deep detail when it comes to the UI in this section, because we'll automatically elaborate on further details about the UI as we get to each individual component within Kasm as we go through the tutorial. So let's switch over to my computer, and what I'll do is go over the user interface. Now the next step is for us to log into Kasm. In order to do that, I'll click on the plus icon right here. Let's just open a new tab. And what I'll do is type in the IP address for the server that I installed Kasm onto. In my case, that was 10.10.10.204. So when I press enter, and I go ahead and accept this warning, it's just letting us know that the certificate is self-signed. There's nothing technically wrong with that. It's just that you need to be aware of that. It's always better to get a real certificate if you can. But for now, I'll click right here for accepting the risk, even though there isn't a risk. It's normal for that to come up. And now we have the actual login page for Kasm. For the username, what we'll do is type in admin@kasm.local, just like that. And the password was provided in the output after you installed Kasm, so I'll paste that in right here. And then I'll click on Login, and check it out. Here's the user interface for Kasm. Now the first thing to understand about the user interface for Kasm is we have two main sections here. We have Workspaces, and we have Admin. I'm in the Admin section right now. We know that because it's the one that's outlined, and that's the information right here. This is all associated with the Admin section. Now on the Workspaces section, if we had workspaces, they would show up here, but as we see right here, no workspaces are currently installed. As we do create workspaces within Kasm, we'll see icons here for the individual workspaces themselves, but again, since I have yet to create one, I have nothing here but this wallpaper. So back here in the Admin tab, let's just go through some of the UI components here. In the next section, we'll be creating actual workspaces, but for right now, I just want to give you an overview of the UI. Now here at the top right corner of the screen, we have our user profile information. So for example, we can edit the profile. We have the username, but we could also fill in the first name, last name, organization, and things like that. We have settings. And one of them that I want to pay attention to right here is the default workspace image. That'll matter more when we get further along into the tutorial, but I just wanted to mention where that was. We'll be going back to this, but essentially what that allows you to do is set a workspace as your default, and that default will be the one in which links will open if you want to open a segregated browsing session, for example. Something we'll go over later, but right here we have options that correspond to our profile. We could also add SSH keys and so on. For the most part though, we're going to use the individual sections here on the left. Right now we're on the dashboard section, and what that's going to do for us is give us some helpful information and metrics when it comes to our installation. At this point though, we have barely anything here for it to report. We have yet to create our first workspace, so we have essentially zero usage when it comes to our solution. But that's okay. As we continue along and create workspaces, we'll see information here show up. But anyway, the dashboard section is where you'll go if you want to see the overall health of your Kasm implementation. Continuing along, let's take a look at the access management section. If we click on that, we'll expand additional subsections here underneath access management. And this section here will help you, configure users and groups, just like the subsections here say. Users are users of the Kasm implementation itself. You could also assign workspaces to groups, so you could create a user here in the user section. Right now, we only have admin, for example, but we can add a new user if we wanted to give someone else access to our implementation by clicking this button. If we do that, we could set up a username. For example, I could type J to create a user that's associated with me. And then I'll create a password here. And I'll just set up my own. This is just a demo, so I'll just type that in. And we have some additional information here that we can configure. We can set the email, the first name, and so on. But what I'm going to do is click Save. And now I have my very own user account set up here on my Kasm implementation. If you wanted to, you could create additional users for your system here if you have additional people that want to use it, but I'll leave that up to you. When it comes to groups, you can create groups as well. Groups are a great way to associate resources like workspaces to individual users by group rather than the users directly. But again, we have the ability to set up groups right here. If we click on Authentication, we have a few additional subsections here. For example, LDAP, SAML, OpenID, and physical tokens. So if you wanted to implement LDAP or something like that, you can absolutely do that by filling out this section. But I'll leave all of that up to you because each of these sections here will pertain to specific infrastructure settings. And if LDAP is something that you use, you might want to consider hooking that into LDAP. It might be useful. Continuing, we have the infrastructure section. And we have sections here for Docker agents, servers, pools, managers, and so on. But what exactly is all of this for? Well, in general, this is where we can view information regarding individual components of our Kasm implementation as they pertain to our infrastructure. This section is most helpful when you have a multi-server installation of Kasm. And with that, you would have its various components spread out among multiple servers. So if you didn't know that was something you could do, well, now you do. An example of this is perhaps a situation where you want to separate the database or scale your workspaces among multiple agents and so on. So if you wanted to scale out your resources with Kasm, then, well, keep in mind you can do that. In this guide, we're only going to cover a single server installation, but if you want to scale out the solution among multiple servers, then this is the section for you. Perhaps this is something that I might cover in a future tutorial if you're interested in seeing that. Now, continuing along, we have the Sessions section here. Now, we'll get back to this section later in the video, but for right now, I'll just mention that the Sessions section enables you to manage existing sessions and even pre-stage a session, which means you can configure it ahead of time. You could also use the Sessions section here to close a particular workspace session. For example, if something gets frozen or stuck or an application is misbehaving, you might want to close the session. If you need to do that, well, you could do that by closing the session within the Sessions tab right here. But currently, we don't really have anything running, so there's nothing for us to close. From here, we'll move on to the Workspaces section of the UI. And this is where you can provision and deprovision workspaces. And I'm going to skip this section for now, since we'll be coming back to this shortly anyway. But this is where we can go to launch new workspaces or manage existing ones on the system. Also, we have settings right here. We have global settings, web filter settings, branding, and so on. So if you want to further configure your Kasm implementation, you could do so here. That includes API information. So if you want to automate something within your environment, you could do that. You can set your reCAPTCHA private key if that's something you want to use with this solution. You have your authentication domain, notice messages, and so on. So this section right here will give you even more control over your implementation of Kasm. Now at this point, it's time to start launching some workspaces so that way you can see the flagship feature of Kasm in action. And that's exactly what we're going to do in the next section. So now that we understand the basics of the UI, then join me in the next section and we'll put Kasm to work. All right, so at this point, what we're going to do is get started with workspaces. Workspaces are at the core of Kasm and are what enable you to set up things like Linux distributions and individual applications. I mentioned earlier that the Workspaces tab right here is where we'll go to manage workspaces that we might already have installed, but since we just set this up during the course of this video, we don't really have anything here. So on the Admin tab, what we're going to do is launch a workspace or two to see what the process looks like. Now, if I go here to Workspaces and expand this, and then I click on Registry, we're going to get a list of some of the applications that are available to us. Now, these applications are being provided to us by Kasm itself. You can see that right here, for example, where it shows Kasm Technologies. But there's other registries that you can add to Kasm as well. You don't have to stick to the one that's provided. Of course, you can add your own. But what I'm going to do is show you the process of launching a workspace. So on my end, I'll launch Alma Linux 9. It's an awesome Linux distro, so I'll click on that. And then I'll click Install. And check that out. It's telling me that the workspace was added. So if I go here to the Workspaces tab, you can see that I have Alma Linux listed right here. Now there's a red exclamation mark that you can see right here at the top right corner of this panel or this tile. And that's just telling me that the image has not been downloaded yet. This image is a larger image, so it might take a few minutes to pull it down from the internet. That's essentially what it's doing. It's reaching out to the Kasm registry. It's looking for the Alma Linux 9 container image that I requested. It's downloading it, and once it's done, it's going to proceed and launch the container for us. So right now, it's just a matter of waiting for this to finish, and once it's done, we could go ahead and check out the Alma Linux workspace. Now, in the meantime, what I'll do is go back to the Admin tab. I'll give that a little bit of time to finish. And let's take a look at some of the other things that we can install here. So we have individual applications like Blender, Audacity, Atom, for example. We have web browsers. Here's Chromium, Brave, Chrome itself, Chrome. We have Firefox. We have GIMP for image editing. That's pretty cool. In fact, you can even run Kali Linux as well as OpenSUSE. So there's definitely quite a few useful workspaces here that we can use. And we also have Doom. How cool is that? So if I click on that, and this time I'll click Edit instead of Install. Install is what I clicked on the previous time, but I'll click Edit instead. And the difference when you click Edit is that you have more control over the deployment. When you click the Install button, it's going to launch the container with the default settings, but if you want to go ahead and customize that, you can. For example, if you're playing a crazy deathmatch or something, you might want to increase the core count, the memory, and things like that. You get the idea. Anyway, as you can see here, there's quite a few options, but I'll click Save. And the Doom workspace has been created. We see that here. It's right underneath Alma Linux, which is the previous one that we set up. And now, as you can see, we have Doom here on the list. It has the red exclamation mark. That means that it's being downloaded. But note here that Alma Linux 9, which previously had that same symbol, it now doesn't. So that should mean that Alma Linux is ready for use. Now, we'll check out Doom in just a moment, but one thing that I wanted to mention about Doom, or at least about gaming or GPUs in general, is that GPUs are supported along with gamepads and lossless rendering, so that enables you to play a game like Doom and, well, see some decent performance. We'll see that in a moment, but let's go ahead and click on the Alma Linux desktop right here. And what I'll do is choose to open this in a new tab rather than replacing my existing one. And one thing that might happen is if you have pop-up blocking enabled in your browser, as I do, it might kill the pop-up. If that happens, we can click right here, at least in the case of Firefox, and we can allow pop-ups from Kasm. So that's what I'll do. And I'll go back to the workspace. The running workspace is shown here on the left-hand side, so I'll click to resume it. And now the tab was able to open. That's pretty cool. And now we have Alma Linux running inside our browser. We also have some controls here that correspond to individual settings and things like that. So if you wanted to go through the clipboard or enable or disable your microphone or something like that, you could do so through the menu here. You can hide the menu by clicking this left arrow. But anyway, as you can see, we have an Alma Linux desktop right here. And for some fun, I'll launch Firefox, which means I'm running Firefox inside of Firefox. That's definitely interesting. But this is an Alma Linux desktop, so that's fair game. Anyway, what I'll do is type in the website for this particular channel. And as you can see, we are able to browse a website from within Firefox inside of, in my case, Firefox. Everything here inside this little window is being run inside of Alma Linux. So, for example, I could run other applications. I can edit some images, for example, with GIMP. We could run Telegram, Visual Studio Code, you name it. But as you can see, we could run applications here within our browser. That's one of the many things that you could do with Kasm. Now back here on the Workspaces tab, I'll just go to the Admin tab and then go back to Workspaces to refresh this. As you can see, Doom is ready. We don't have that symbol here on the upper right corner anymore, so I'll click on that. And I'll launch it in a new tab. And check it out. We have Doom. We have it running right here inside our web browser, and look at that performance. It looks like it's running very well, and it is. So we have Doom running from within a container on Kasm being presented to our web browser. And that's really cool. Now, what I'm going to do at this point is go back to my Kasm tab. And this tab is my Kasm console. As you can see, I have two workspaces running. I have an Alma Linux workspace, and I have a Doom workspace. If I want to resume one, I could click on resume right here, but what I want to do instead is show you how to manage workspaces, or in this case, manage sessions. Something that I mentioned earlier, if you have a session that's stuck or anything like that, or you need to close a session for whatever reason, you can do that. So what I'll do here is just stop this particular session. Let's just delete it. And I'll close these tabs as well. But here in the Workspaces tab, we still have Doom right here. I could launch it if I want to run it, but the one that was running was a session that I closed through the Session menu. And that's something, again, that you might have to do every now and then. If you manage this solution for a team of users, you might have a request every now and then to close a session if the application is misbehaving, but you get the idea. Now let's go ahead and launch an additional workspace. Let's go back to the registry, and let's choose another application to launch. Now what I'll do is launch a Firefox workspace. We have Firefox right here, so I'll click on it. Let's install it. Workspace has been added. And sure enough, we see Firefox right here, and the image is downloading, so we're going to give this a moment to finish, and I'll be right back. All right, it looks like it's done. So I'll click on Firefox. Let's go ahead and launch it. And check it out. We have Firefox running inside my browser. Now you might be wondering why you would want a browser inside of a browser, but think of it this way. If you wanted a throwaway browser session, for example, or a browser session that's isolated from the rest of your browser, then this is a great way to have a sandboxed browsing environment. That's one of the things that this enables you to do, because once you delete this particular workspace, then the history is gone as well. But if you wanted to browse in a sandboxed browsing session, this is one way to do that. Now, what I'll do is leave this running. There's something else that I would like to show you. So if we go back to our Kasm UI here, our Kasm console, and then go to Admin, and what I'll do is click on the username up here at the top right corner. I'll edit the profile, go to Settings, and right here we have Default Workspace Image, and what we want to do is choose our default workspace image. Now, one thing that you could do with this is set the default workspace image, so that way if you want to open a link from your primary browser in a Kasm browser, you could do that. And if that doesn't make sense, let's just walk through the entire process, and I think you'll get it immediately. So what I'll do is choose Firefox as my default Kasm instance here, and now that's been set. Now the next thing I'm going to do is install the Kasm add-on here for my browser. This is also available for Google Chrome as well, but what I'll do is just go ahead and go to Settings. I'll go down here to Extensions and Themes, in the case of Firefox at least. And right here we have this search box we could use to find additional add-ons. So what I'll do is type in Kasm right here and press Enter. And we have the Kasm Open in Isolation plugin here. Again, this is available for other browsers as well. I'm just using Firefox on my side here. So I'll add it to Firefox. And it was added. I go to Add-ons and Themes, and then Extensions. We have the Open in Isolation extension here, and the first thing we're going to do is click the three dots here to set some preferences for it. And what we want to do is set the server address. Now here we have 10.10.10.204, so what I'll do is just copy that. I'm too lazy to type it. And then we'll paste it in here over top of my.kasm.server. We want the actual IP address or fully qualified domain name here, so our add-on knows where to find our Kasm server. And with that, I'm going to click Save. It told me that the options were saved, so we should be good here. And let's look at an example of how this works. Let's go ahead and close these other tabs here. I'll open a new one. And as a random example, I'll just go to the main website for this channel. And let's say, for example, I wanted to open up this blog post right here inside of Kasm and have this open in isolation, hence the name of the plugin. So I'll right click on this. And at the bottom here, we have Open Link in Kasm. So what's going to happen when I click on this is the link that I right clicked is going to be opened. But instead of being opened in my web browser, my main web browser here, it's going to be opened inside of the web browser for Kasm, or the one that I set as the default workspace. That's why we set the default workspace to Firefox. We wanted that to be the one that links open up in if we go to open a link in isolation. Anyway, I'll click on that. It opens a new window, and here we go. This blog post right here just opened in isolation within Firefox that's running within Kasm. So now I could browse right here. I could go through this article, read it, whatever I want to do, and close it when I'm done. And I was able to do that by simply installing the browser plugin. Let's go ahead and close this for now. And this as well. And we'll get back to our normal session. Now, what I'll do is just close out of everything here. And we have these two workspaces. So what I'll do is stop this one. So that's one thing that you could do. You could stop the workspace. Under the admin tab, if we go to workspaces, on the workspaces tab, we have a list of workspaces that are installed, not unlike the workspaces section here. But here we can configure the workspaces that we have in the system. So if I was finished playing Doom, for example, I'm not very good at that game anyway. If I wanted to remove the workspace, I can do so by clicking the delete icon right here. So I'll do that right now. So if you were curious how you go about deleting a workspace, well, now you know. At this point, what I recommend that you guys do is go through the registry here and proceed to, well, experiment with different things that you can install. If you want to run Fedora, for example, you could do that. Maybe Inkscape or any of the other container images that are available here as workspaces. This is something that you can do if you want to explore some of the things that you could do with this solution. I'll leave that up to you, but go ahead and have some fun with this. You can launch Rocky Linux. You could play Super Tux Kart, check your email with Thunderbird, edit some images. You get the idea. And after you've had some fun with Kasm, I'll see you in the next section where we'll continue to learn even more about Kasm. In the previous section, I walked you through the process of spinning up a workspace within Kasm. We did so through the first-party registry, the registry that comes with Kasm, but what do you do if you want to run something that's not included within that registry? Well, in this section, what I'm going to do is show you how to add an additional registry to Kasm. So let's do it. Here in my browser, I already have the dashboard pulled up right here. So what I'm going to do is click on Workspaces, which in my case is already expanded, and then I'll click on Registry. Now, this is the first-party registry that I was referring to, the one that comes with Kasm. So anytime you install Kasm, you'll have this registry right here by default. And this registry includes quite a few applications, as you can see. A few of these we've already gone over during this video. However, like I mentioned, we can install additional registries, so let's work on that right now. So what I'll do is click on Registries right here, and we have the first-party registry, but we could also add another registry here by clicking Add New, so that's what I'll do. And then we could put in the registry URL right here. Now what I'll do is just open a new tab here, and I'll show you the registry that I want to add, which is going to be at linuxserver.io. And if you've never been to linuxserver.io before, then I highly recommend you check out this site. You can simply go to linuxserver.io, and there you'll find all kinds of individual container images that you can use. Now, linuxserver.io is not specific to Kasm, it's just something that Kasm can use. So here we have a list of some of the containers that you can get from this project. So I recommend that you check this out if you're interested in that. But what we have here is a registry that is provided by linuxserver.io for the purposes of being used within Kasm itself. So what we're going to do is copy the workspace registry link right here, which I've done. And then here in Kasm, what I'll do is paste it right here into this box. So we'll go ahead and add it. And it's letting us know that we are adding a third-party registry. And the reason why we're getting this disclaimer here is because third-party registries are not something that Kasm can keep a full eye on. So the quality of the registry depends on the registry itself and how it's maintained. But if we want to go ahead and add the registry, we could do so by clicking this button here. So that's what I'll do. And now, as you can see, we have linuxserver.io added here to our list of registries. So let's go to Available Workspaces now that we've added that registry. And we can filter by the registry. We have the two here that we have installed. We have the first-party registry and the new third-party registry that we've added. And as you scroll through the list here, you'll see right here in the second line where each workspace is coming from. So here on the first row, each of these are being provided by Kasm within the first-party registry. Here we have something from linuxserver.io, so that's something that exists within the registry that we've added. But you get the idea. Now that we've added that registry, we have even more options here when it comes to things that we can install. Now on several of these workspaces, we have an alert icon here, and thus telling us that the workspace has defined configurations that may provide elevated privileges. That's something to keep in mind if that's something that matters to you. But anyway, what I'm going to do right now is launch a workspace from linuxserver.io. So what we'll do is scroll through the list and find one that we want to run. I'll just randomly choose FileZilla, for example, so I'll click on that, and then I'll click Install, just like I would with any other workspace. It's being added, and here on the Workspaces tab, you can see that I have FileZilla. Just like before, we have the red alert icon here to let us know that this particular workspace is not available right now. It's downloading in the background, so what we'll do is just wait for that to finish, and I'll be right back. And now it looks like it's ready. So just like with any other workspace, we can launch FileZilla by clicking on it. And just like before, I'm going to launch it in a new tab. Let's see what happens. And check it out. We have FileZilla running within Kasm. How cool is that? We were able to grab this from the linuxserver.io registry, a registry that I've added to my Kasm implementation. Now, of course, you want to vet every registry that you add to your installation here. Sometimes things can become obsolete, or maybe a registry is no longer being maintained. If you add a registry outside of Kasm's first-party registry, then it's up to you to double-check that. But as you can see, I'm able to add additional registries and launch workspaces from those registries. Alright, so in this section, what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about the licensing and some of the different tiers when it comes to Kasm. There's different installation types that you can have and also different tiers when it comes to support agreements and things like that. So what I'm going to do is demystify that right here in this section. And to begin, let's talk about the two different types of deployments. When it comes to Kasm, you can have a server deployment as well as a cloud deployment. The server deployment type is what we've been using so far. This pertains to the self-hosted version of Kasm that you can install on your own server, VM, or VPS. The cloud version, on the other hand, or the software as a service version, as it's also known, is different from the server version in that it's hosted for you, so that way you don't have to worry about maintaining the underlying server itself. And here on the pricing page, if I go to the cloud section, we have a few different options here when it comes to pricing. And the personal tier will cost $5 per user per month. That gives you a basic experience here. With this tier, it gives you 100 to 300 hours of use per month. It gives you the ability to run browsers, desktops, basically Linux distributions, individual applications, and so on. The Teams pricing tier is $18 per user per month. And right here, you can see some of the benefits that this pricing tier gives you. And it gives you next business day support if you need that kind of thing. If you upgrade to the Enterprise Edition, then you can get same business day support, which is even better. Now, this is for the software as a service or cloud version, again, meaning that it's not hosted by you. If you want to run Kasm from your own hardware, you'll do so by choosing the server version here. Again, that's the one that we've already installed anyway. And the pricing changes when you're self-hosting the solution. For example, right here we have the community tier, and the price is $0 per user per month. And that makes sense. It's your infrastructure, so of course you can use it. It's your infrastructure. And this tier is basically for nonprofit personal use, as it shows right here. Now, you can't include custom branding with this tier, but you can get full usage out of the solution. It's what I've been using in the video so far, and as you can see, I wasn't limited at all. Now, the professional tier is $5 per user per month, and that also gets you next business day support if that's something that you need to take advantage of. And of course, we have the enterprise tier here at $10 per user per month. So what I recommend that you do on your side is just choose the deployment type and pricing tier that matches what you want to achieve from the solution. You can self-host it and stick to community. It doesn't cost you anything to do that. For example, you could self-host the solution and use the community pricing tier, which costs literally nothing. And you can get these features right here. So if you want to self-host the solution, and this is especially useful for Homelabbers, for example, then you'll probably want to go along with this particular choice right here. If you want support or any of these additional features, you could do that. If you intend to use this at work, for example, you might consider the cloud version, so it's not hosted by you. And again, the prices will change with that deployment type, but you get the idea. Whether you go with the software as a service version or you decide to self-host it, that's entirely up to you. But right here, you have a listing of the features and the pricing for each of the deployment types and pricing tiers. So I'll have a link in the description down below that'll take you right to this section if you want to go ahead and check this out and make a decision for your implementation. And there's our video. In this video, we went through Kasm in full detail. I taught you how to install it, how to launch a workspace, remove a workspace, how to add an additional registry to get access to even more workspaces. We went through a lot. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought of this video, what you might want to see from me in the future, or anything that you want to let me know about. Let me know in the comments. I look forward to reading what you guys have to say. In the meantime, though, thank you so much for checking out this video. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next video.